This is Viterbi Voices.
Coming to you from the University of Southern California, Viterbi School of Engineering.
We're here to give you the inside scoop on research, classes, student life, and so much more.
All of these shared by students, faculty, alumni, and other members of the USC community.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Viterbi Voices. As usual, I am one of your hosts. My name is Paul Ledesma, Executive Director of Undergraduate Admission here at the USC Viterbi School of Engineering.
Hey, everybody. I'm Maya, your other co-host, a current senior studying Industrial and Systems Engineering here at USC.
Oh my gosh, Maya, it's the end of the first week of classes for you. I hope you're holding up well. And I don't know, maybe we should tell them we're recording this way in advance of that, but let's pretend it's the end of the first classes. I'm sure you're holding up well. What in this semester that you have, your last semester of classes, as we went over last week, what is the class that you are most excited about?
That's a great question. I'm taking one class that I'm excited about, and that's my GE, which stands for my general education credit. I think it's like a sociology. I can't actually remember what the credit is in, but the class is about it's an English class, and it's about narratives in medicine. And all I know is the instructor has just like absolutely great reviews, and this is a class that filled up like as soon as possible. So I think it's a lot of upperclassmen, like it's supposed to be a very interesting GE. So I'm very excited to take this English class as a little bit of flavor of something different. But then I'm also excited. I'm going into my second semester of my senior capstone course. So in Industrial and Systems Engineering, and actually a couple other engineering majors. This is like a year-long project that we're doing for a client. So this is like the second part where we're actually going to start doing like more of the actual engineering and finishing this up. So I'm excited to wrap that up.
So I think the class that you're referring to is anthropology and narrative medicine, an anthropology class.
I think it's narratives in medicine. I forget what it's called, but it's very similar to that.
That is very cool. I bet it's going to be awesome. And narrative medicine as an overall field is incredibly interesting to understand. Or maybe you're taking, now I found it, Introduction to Narrative Medicine, English 280.
Yes.
That's what you're taking. So it's a study of literary modes of narrative and their uses in medical understanding, character formation, social identity, and relations between mind and body. That is a really, really cool class for a general education class. Only 15 students in it. It's going to be a small kind of discussion focused class. That is really, really cool. Some people, we talk about this a lot. Some people might be shocked and maybe a little bit concerned that as a senior, you're taking a general education class. Can you describe how the curriculum is structured? Because most people believe you take your first 2 years of GEs and then you kind of do everything else, which is kind of the old school way, but still a lot of schools across the country do, but that's just not how we do it here.
Yeah, and USC does it in a way that I really appreciate. So the idea coming in is that every semester you're taking some engineering classes, but you're also like taking some general education courses. So you're never like doing everything all at once in a semester, like I guess unless you really want to, like you're not going to have all general education classes in one semester. So I personally am really excited to have like this general education credit that I've slated to take my senior year, because it's like I'm not taking all engineering classes, even though I'm like a senior and like pretty old. I've taken a lot of the engineering classes, but I still have this space and opportunity to take a general class. So yeah,
that's great. It's what I would describe. Other universities do what I describe as front loading of prerequisites, and we don't do that. There's a little opportunity to expand stuff. And people always think that it's horrible. Oh my God, why would you take a GE as a senior? And I always tell them, and hopefully Maya, you can jump in here. As a senior, you're going to love taking a GE as a senior because it just is a really different mind break from technical, design classes.
Yeah. And you're not the only senior in these classes, which is really cool. Like every time I've taken a general education course, there's been like, yes, there are some freshmen and I meet some younger people, but I've also met a lot of upperclassmen that have turned into pretty good friends. So actually one of my good friends who's also a senior, she's going to med school, and she just texted me that she was in my class for this next semester.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Very, very cool. All right, well, let's get into this week's episode. This week's episode is a old friend of mine. When I mean old friend of mine, meaning we've been friends for a long time, not an old person. But this is Kevin Henry. Kevin Henry has been at USC for quite some time, which you'll hear about. I don't want to get into, but he's been at USC for quite some time. He used to work he started in the admission office. He kind of came over to the Viterbi School very shortly thereafter, did some work in the computer science department and student affairs, has worked in our Center for Engineering and Diversity, and currently he holds the role of Senior Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at the Viterbi School of Engineering. Now, I don't want to spoil any of this conversation because he explains it so much more than I do, but I want to tell you, Kevin is not only a great person, he's a fantastic person to hang out with. He is super funny. He is super committed to student success, which you will hear. And he is a fantastic representative of why diversity, equity, and inclusion is important, not only at USC, not only in the Viterbi School of Engineering, but everywhere across this country, especially as quote unquote DEI initiatives are under attack across the country. We talk a lot about how this is about student success. And this is about how no matter who you are or how you identify, when you come to USC, we have people here to help you be successful. And sometimes that has to do with academic support. Sometimes that has to do with social support. Sometimes that has to do with emotional support. Sometimes that has to do with programming and creating activities and involvement opportunities. And sometimes, and more often than not, it's a combination of all those things. And so I want you to hear Kevin's story. He talks a lot about how he went to college, where he went, how he went through that, why he works in higher education, what he does in higher education. And also because we've known each other for quite some time, if you go all the way to the end, I give him an opportunity to share embarrassing stories about me because he knows a few. And I let him get one. Let him get one in there, which I think is a good one because we spent a lot of time together, especially when almost nearly 20 years ago when he used to work for the Office of Admission. We used to travel together. So there's definitely stories. And I'm glad that he was kind and gave a safe one that makes any sense. So let's hand you right over to me and Kevin Henry, and we'll see you on the back end of this episode to talk a little bit more about where we are in the admission process and what you can do. There he is.
We're Zoom jumping today.
I was like, hey, it's good to see you again. I'm like, oh, I just saw you.
Right. 20 minutes later, right?
Exactly. Well, welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you don't mind. We're just gonna get it going right away.
Yeah.
Kevin, I know you. We've known each other for a long time, but a lot of people don't necessarily know you that are listening right now. Give all of our listeners. We have about 10 of them. Give them a little bit about yourself, where you come from, what you do, all the things, whatever you want to start with. Let's start there and I'll dive in.
Awesome. Yeah, we have known each other for a long time, and it actually makes me feel old when I think about how long we have known each other. I started at USC in 2003 in the Central Office of Admission.
So literally, we've known each other for 20 years.
20 years. Yeah, literally. But yeah, so that's when I started my career at USC. But prior to that, I graduated from the University of California, Santa Barbara.
Oh, you slipped there. You've been at USC for too long.
Too long. Yeah. Anytime I say university, I think of
you go straight California. Yeah. So UCSB, Santa Barbara, go Gauchos.
UCSB. Yeah, go Gauchos. So graduated UCSB in 2000, and I started working in housing at UCSB for 3 years prior to coming to USC. And so, right out of college, started off in higher education, but on the housing side. And then started working at USC in 2003, Central Office of Admission, did that for 3 years before joining Viterbi in 2006. Wow. And so been in Viterbi for 17 years and I've kind of jumped around and moved around Viterbi, since then. But outside of that, native of Los Angeles, grew up in LA, graduate of Carson High School, class of 96. And most of my family's here.
What's funny is we were talking, and I was thinking about you before you came on, and I was like, I don't actually know where Kevin grew up. So you grew up in Carson.
Grew up in Carson, right down the 110. Yeah, and so my family's
Well,
from LA as well, so everybody's kind of local.
you were basically so I the God, I mean at the time I think it was coming up as like the Home Depot Center, right?
Right,
Like the
right,
arena. So like when that was built, you were kind of right in the middle of all that because that
right in
opened
the
like late
middle.
90s, right? Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah,
What was
right in
that
the
like
middle
as a
of that.
community with that giant kind of not giant? Well, I guess at the time, now all these
Yeah,
other now SoFi and all these other things that have gone into play,
right.
but that was a huge deal, this new soccer
Yeah,
arena.
yeah, definitely a huge deal. It brought a lot of traffic to the area. Carson is a middle class suburb, so kind of slow. Everybody kind of lives there. Not a lot going on outside of that. Aside from the IKEA, it's one of the few places that we actually have an IKEA. So
It's
IKEA
true.
is also
It's
our
true.
other claim to fame. But yeah, when it was built, it brought in a lot of a lot of jobs, but also a lot
Yeah.
of traffic. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
IKEA, man, I hate to say it, but like when people say Carson, I think IKEA because it's like
yeah.
well, that's where
Right.
there's what there's an IKEA in Burbank and there's an IKEA in Carson. So
In
depending on what
Carson.
part of
Yep.
LA you're in, you go to one of these two
Or the other. Yeah. They're like
IKEAs.
bookends as well, as
They
far as
are.
distance.
They
So
really
yeah.
are. I ask a lot of people this, and I'm kind of
Uh-huh.
curious on your perspective. Because a lot of our listeners are prospective high school students and their parents. What
Yeah.
what was the college search process like for you? Given that it was a while ago, right? We're really
Yeah.
old dudes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
do you remember like what was the biggest like stress or pain point for you as you went through that process?
Yeah, no, I totally do. And I actually recall it quite often because I think about my process and compare it to what students today are going through.
Hmm.
Back then, it was really just conversations with my parents about where I would want to go to school, where I would want to move to potentially. And then really kind of narrowing it down to 5 schools. I didn't apply to a lot of schools. When I talk to students
Yeah,
today, many of them will
different.
apply to sometimes upwards of 20 schools. And that just was not even
No,
in my mind.
no.
And so I narrowed it down to 5 schools that were just high on my list for various reasons or that I hadn't engaged with and during my time as a high school student. I spent a lot of time in the college counseling office. And, back then, I'm sure it's completely different now. Back then, it was, going through massive books and looking
Yeah,
at what schools were out there and what
right,
majors that those schools had and what they offered,
right.
and what the application process was like for each individual school. And then sitting in on a lot of personal statement workshops and like how to write a really well thought out personal statement
Hmm.
and pulling all that together. And so, I spent a lot of time senior year kind of navigating that. My parents really gave me the autonomy to explore that on my own. So they were very supportive, very encouraging, but they wanted me to figure out what spoke to me as a student, which I thought at the time I did, I wanted them to be a little bit more involved, but I appreciate that they left it up to me. The decision was mine, where to apply and where I was going to go. I will add a caveat. They're both graduates of UC Santa Barbara. So there was some indirect, encouragement that existed there as well. But the decision was mine.
Yeah, at the time you're like, no, no, no. It's because I at the time it's like, no, this is my decision. Looking back on it, you're like, oh, maybe they were the whole time just behind
Right.
the scenes pulling
Well,
all the right
definitely.
strings.
Definitely.
Um, it's super funny how much of our lives personally overlap because
Yeah.
we're the same age.
Yeah.
I'm a graduate of the class of 96.
Yeah.
And when it came down to it, like I was between going to USC and UC Santa Barbara. Like those were the two
Wow.
schools that I was thinking about. And I often think about this alternate parallel universe where I went to UC Santa Barbara. Um,
Uh-huh.
and because you were there with friends of mine, not that you ever knew them, which might be
Yeah.
interesting. Maybe at a different day we'll start listing up people that were there.
Maybe. Yeah.
But when you think of your time in college, how do you define it? Like, what was it? Things that you
Yeah.
did? Was it groups of people that you hung out with? Where did you find success? What would you do if you were to do
Yeah.
it all over again? There are often questions I ask about to people
Yeah.
at this age, and because you work with college students on a daily
Right.
basis.
Right. That is an awesome question. And it's one that I actually think about a lot. College, and it's probably why I work in higher education. It was the best years of my life.
Hmm.
And I think the reason it was that for me was it was where I grew up. where I was able to explore who I was,
Hmm.
and grow and evolved. And I think, now doing the work that we do and working with college age students, I'm able to see it as well from an outside perspective. But, those 4 years are so transformative. Who a student is as a freshman and who they are when they leave a university are two
Hmm.
totally different people.
Hmm.
Even within that first year, the amount of growth and evolution that happens in that first freshman year is exponential.
Yeah.
And I'll say this for our parents, the students that you leave when you move them in on move-in day are not the students you're going to get back during the summer when they come
Not at
back.
all.
They become completely different person in the best ways possible. And that learning for me it was fun, it was exciting, it was new, it was progressive. I was able to really explore what I was interested in through student organizations, through friends, through majors. Now, I'm someone that changed my major quite a bit when I was in undergrad.
Oh, really?
Just
What was that?
so actually, you probably didn't know this about me either,
No.
but it's really ironic. I started out as a computer science
What?
major.
What?
Yeah,
What?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Computer science. I wanted to design video games.
No kidding.
That was who I was. That was what I wanted to do. And at the time, even though it was a long time ago, but it doesn't seem that long ago,
Sure, yeah.
that was not a really big industry that people
No,
went into. And
not at
so,
all.
and that's one of the reasons why when I'm talking to parents and I'm talking to students, I really brag about USC and our offerings, especially within Viterbi, because and the amount of academic advisement that our students get, because I got some really bad academic advisement
Hmm.
during that time. And my academic advisor told me, people don't really go and decide they want to design video games. They just kind of stumble into it. So, that might not be the course or the road that you want to pick. And so it was discouraging. And so
Yeah.
now working in this environment and knowing our academic advisors and hearing what is told to our students, I'm always floored at just the quality of advisement that our advisors give our students, and really encouraging them, whatever it is that the student wants to do, to really pursue, and not only encouraging it, but helping build those pathways to it. So, I'm like, man, if I was a student at USC, I would have stayed with computer science. I would have been a video game designer.
Yeah.
So, but that's
Wow.
how I started off, and
You
I
started
ended
with
up
computer
moving
science, want to
around.
go to games, and then yeah,
Yeah.
where did it go?
So from there, I was just trying to figure things out. I ended up going into, I think the next one I jumped into, I made a complete kind of 180 and went into, this is going to make you laugh, pharmacology of all
Really?
majors. Yes. And that was because I had an older mentor that was at UC Santa Barbara that was a pharmacology major, and just talking with her, and she was kind of telling me about her labs and what she was
Uh-huh.
doing. It just sounded really interesting. So I've always kind of been science geared or focused. And then I took some of those courses and didn't like it at all. And it's like, might not be for me. And I ended up kind of landing on a dual degree, which was sociology and law, pre-law. So I started to look
Yeah.
at law schools, but I really loved more the sociology classes that I was taking more than I did the pre-law stuff. But I found that it was a lot of cool intersections there. And what I found, and this is why I think, college and exploring is so pivotal and important, is that I found that through sociology, I really loved people,
Yeah.
and why people do what they do,
Yeah.
and what factors contribute to that, and what plays into it, nature versus nurture,
Mm.
and outside factors, and how do people become who they become. And so that was kind of the foundation of what I loved about sociology and what eventually led me into higher education.
Huh, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
Um, what's funny is that we have very similar pathways,
yeah,
and I'm curious, like whether, because we always talk about this from an admissions staff point of like, how
yeah,
do people? I get asked this all the time. How did you end up in admission? I'm like, no one knows. Like,
yeah,
no one
yeah,
ever knows how you end up in admission. But what's funny is that
yeah.
we have like very similar pathways where it's like
Hmm.
we started on, I thought I would do this.
Uh-huh.
Turns out, no, I got influenced by my sphere of, peers and people I'm around to start looking into this. Turns out that was not any good for me, but then that landed me over here. And it's like, I never want people to think it's like we're just
Yeah.
kind of going where the wind blows us, but it was like there is a path and there
Yeah.
is a layer of growth and there's a layer
Yeah.
of all those unknowns that you kind of wade through
Hmm.
in college, which I think is
Yeah.
foreign to a lot of our listeners because I think they're supposed to know, like, no, you just know what you do when you come in. But engineers have that same,
Yeah.
relative parallel pathway. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
between different engineering majors.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's where they want to go afterwards.
Hmm.
But I think the lesson here that I know you talk to students about all the time is just the idea of like, yeah, you just got to get through this, like
Hmm.
go through because you mentioned these colleges where all this growth happens, but like
Hmm.
real talk, it's like this is where you mess up. It's like
Yeah.
growth is designed because you really mess up and you
Yeah.
like find out like, well, that was wrong and that was
Definitely.
wrong. And there's lots of pains in growing up. And
Yeah.
we talk
Yeah.
about how, oh my God, best 4 years of my life. I'll tell
Hmm.
students all the time, no one says that in their freshman year.
No.
It's just when it's over, like when you get through it, you're like, oh my God, look who I am now. I've
Yeah.
been,
Yeah.
whether that's baptism by fire,
Hmm.
emboldened, the steel gets stronger from the blade gets
Hmm.
stronger from the fire, all that others, all the metaphors in
Yeah.
life, right? They just
Yeah.
kind of go through the idea of like, yeah, college sucks. You get beat up
Yeah.
and you come
Yeah.
out on the other end a different person.
Yeah, yeah. That is it. That's it in a nutshell. And I think, you hit on some really interesting points that help me brag about USC Viterbi. That exploration, I think,
Mm,
is so important within engineering. And that's not something I had at my institution or that I see at a lot of schools is that you don't have to have it figured out as an engineer when you first get in the door.
no,
You can move around and you can explore engineering and figure out what speaks to you as a student.
right.
So that exploration, I think, is so important. But yeah, it is where you mess up, and I think it's looking back on it, hindsight 2020, it's where you mess up and you can figure it out and you are supported to do so. And there are places, procedures, resources, people in place that are expecting you to mess
Yeah.
up and stumble through a lot of it, but are there to get you back on track,
Yeah.
to help it make sense, and to make sure that you're safe, and that you get
Hmm.
through it and you get to that end of it. And once it is a delicate dance that you really can't appreciate until you're finished. And then you look back and you're like, wow, I have so many alums that come back, that have been out and have graduated and gone into industry, and they come back and they say, I really appreciate the work that you do because I
Hmm.
didn't get it when I was in the middle of it. But now that I'm out of it, I see how you kept me
Yeah.
here. You kept me safe, but you got me through it and you allowed me to do what I needed to do and explore. But I was able to do that in the best way possible. And that's what college is and how we do and why we do the work we do.
I mean, we're stumbling into a wellness conversation, which I'm
Yeah.
happy to have, but I think
Yeah.
it's fascinating how one word you just used, I always want to clarify, is keeping students safe.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you don't let them fall. I mean,
Right.
like, and that's an important element there. Like, I always use metaphors of college as a high
Yeah.
wire act, but the cool part about it is this is where you have a net, and that's who
Yeah.
we are.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to fall a lot to do that. And a lot of, I think, our current generation is thinking they're never supposed to fall.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of the stress comes in this generation of
Yeah.
like, I'm not supposed to fall. I'm not supposed to mess up at all.
Yeah. Yeah. We see that a lot of self-imposed stress and, and really it creating a difficult pathway for
Hmm.
themselves forward because we expect for them to not have it all figured out. And I think there's a lot of students put the stress on themselves that they have to have it figured out when they get here. They have to know what they want to do when they finish. They have to know where they
Yeah.
want to intern at. And I always tell students some of the most powerful and most valuable information is finding out things you don't want to do and
Right.
finding out the things that don't work for you, because those
Yeah.
stumbles are where those pathways are really built and you really kind of figure out who you are through it. But it does kind of lead into wellness. And I think, especially that first year, students come in feeling like they have to perform at a certain level and that
Hmm.
everyone is watching them and they have to
Yeah.
make everyone proud and happy. And I think we do a good job at Viterbi by dismantling that, during that first year and letting them know that, we're all in this together and everybody has those same insecurities and same fears and that they're valid. It's
Yeah.
okay to have them. It's just not okay to live in them. And that you can, you're entitled to be human and make decisions for yourself and mess up at times.
Yeah.
And that we're going to be here to support you and get you through it and and make sure that you're okay in the end. And sometimes it is the tough love of letting a student sit in it a little bit and be
Right.
uncomfortable, and try to figure it out themselves, because a lot of times they know the answers, they know how to work through this, they just need
Yeah.
somebody to help them talk through it, and that's what we do.
Totally. So I took you on a completely different tangent, but we were talking about kind of your first jobs and
Yeah, yeah,
the likelihood of or the rationale or the rear view mirror thinking of like, well, that's probably why I got into working in higher education.
yeah,
And I mean, I think anyone listening right now hears it, this idea of
yeah,
like, I like to work with these students because I like helping. I like
yeah.
being part of their process and helping them succeed.
Mhm.
Um, when you were about to leave UCSB, was it just that like you were seeing a universe that you found yourself comfortable in that you wanted to just start doing stuff? Or because this is of course there's two versions of my story, right?
Yeah, yeah.
There's a version of like this is where I found my calling, yada yada yada. There's another was like I was just lazy and I found a place I was comfortable.
Yeah, it's very similar.
Yeah.
Once again, being young,
Yeah.
finished college and, had my first job at Santa Barbara. And one of the things that I did feel, UCSB, if for anybody that's listening that's never been there, it sits right on the beach, very beautiful campus.
Yeah.
It
It's amazing.
it didn't feel like real life for me. It felt like
No.
where I needed to probably retire one day.
Yeah.
But I kind of wanted to just get out into the world.
Hmm.
And so it was a bit of a leap of faith on my end. Like I didn't know what was next. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew I needed to jump. And so I jumped.
Hmm.
And that jump led me right back to my parents' house. And so,
Hmm.
I left Santa Barbara without a job and not knowing what was going to be next. And I was going to figure it out. And I moved back home with my parents. And that was very humbling because, once again, I was not the same person that left them. And
Yeah,
so now I'm leaving.
you didn't really fit anymore.
I didn't fit anymore. That is
No.
the best way to put it. And so, but I had a plan. And so, I knew the type of work that fulfilled me, and that was working with people. And I knew that I loved higher education. And USC, growing up in LA, USC was always a school that I had dealings with. I was in, weekend programs at USC as a
No.
a high school student. And so it was someplace that I always kind of visited and spent time on the campus. And so I just kind of thought like, let me look at USC and just see what's there. And I saw a position in the Office of Admission, as an assistant director, responsible for recruitment
Yeah.
for, all of the different programs at USC. And prior to that, being a student at UC Santa Barbara, I did a lot of help with the Office of Admission, and so we worked on a lot of diversity initiatives and recruitment. And so, as a student leader, I helped out in recruiting students from high schools, to UC Santa Barbara. So it was a
Hmm.
skill that I thought, I liked doing that.
Yeah.
Maybe I could lean into that a little bit heavier. And so I applied and interviewed and got the job.
It's so funny. You said you were there for 3 years. In my head, you were there for longer.
It feels like it.
And this is my
Yeah,
ignorance. I kind of think of like, oh yeah, no, Kevin's an admission person. I'm like, no, you only did
yeah,
admission for 3 years. Like you've done so
3 years.
much more work in Viterbi with diversity.
Hmm.
You had your stint in graduate admission, and now you're in your current position
Hmm.
here. How do you explain? This is hard. I don't mean defend. That's a really weird
Yeah.
question. How do you describe that arc? Because I think it makes a
Mm.
lot of sense, but I think to a lot of outside people, it does not.
Yeah.
And I think the thread here, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is the fact that like you just like meeting students and working with them
Yeah.
one on one. Like
Yeah.
let's get you through whatever this process is you're going through.
Yeah. That's a really good question too. So when I worked in admission, I got a chance to meet some amazing students and parents and families. And so you find that it is a collaborative effort, and you're
Hmm.
you're working with them throughout this entire process. And so, traveling to different high schools in different regions and parts of the country, and hearing why students want to come to USC, and living and sitting in that passion with them was awesome. It was one of those things where it was kind of bittersweet sweet for me as a human and as a person, because once that process was over and they got admitted and they're coming and
Mm.
we celebrate,
Yeah.
I'm already moving on to the next group of students and
Yeah.
families, and to get them in. And there was connections built there that I had to not necessarily let go, but now it's time to move and get the next class in.
Hmm.
And so I personally wanted to work more closely with the students that were coming in, and to have more time with them and to see that growth. I didn't get a chance to really see that growth that I loved over the 4 years, because I was constantly focused on the next class.
Yeah.
And so that's what led me to leave admission and jump over into student affairs within the School of Engineering in Viterbi, because now in that role, I got a chance to really work with the students and spend the next 4 years with them and put programs together and be that first point of contact when there was a problem that
Right.
came up, be it,
Right.
socially or in their classroom, and also be that person that they ran to when they had successes. So
Yeah.
when they got that first internship, when they're getting ready to graduate and they have 5 full-time employment offers, and their problem is trying to figure out which one they want to take, and we sit and talk through that, like that
Mhm.
was fun for me, and it was exciting, and I loved to just be with them a little bit longer. So that's kind of what led me to this.
Yeah.
And then, from there, I ended up, part of my responsibilities was also doing some graduate recruitment. So building pipelines to the master's and the PhD programs in Viterbi. And so, that I think my role really kind of set in a good place where, I was able to have conversations with our current USC students about what happens after the 4 years. Have you thought about masters? Have you thought
Mm.
about PhD? Do you like research? Well, let's get you in a lab. Let's get you some hands-on research
Yeah.
experience. Do you not know what research is? Well, let's get you in a lab and see
Right.
if you
Right.
like it,
Right.
and explore. Once again, we go back to that explore. And
Hmm.
so being kind of a conductor of exploration was part of the reason why I made that jump.
That's awesome. In
Yeah.
your current role,
Yeah.
you are the Senior Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion here at the Viterbi School. And so it's probably a longer preamble than necessary, but I think there's a lot to talk about here related
Yeah.
to the concepts of diversity, equity, inclusion, and how it's kind of, I don't know, in many ways, in my opinion, is kind of like glossed over in a lot of
Yeah.
weird ways. And in
Mhm.
other conversations that we've had, that those names and those titles mean different things in different places. And diversity, equity, inclusion related to things that happen at the university, things that happen at the engineering school. There's lots of layers, whether that's faculty, whether that's staff, whether that's students. And so, can you let's start with the concept,
Yeah.
because I think that maybe a lot of people don't understand
Yeah.
how important diversity, equity, inclusion is in a
Yeah.
university space, how that
Mhm.
can reflect and then move forward into a professional space,
Yeah.
how it's often misunderstood or
Mhm.
purposefully turned on its head
Yeah.
for other whatever purposes that person might be using,
Yeah. Yeah.
and how oddly enough, some people see diversity, equity, inclusion and think that does not apply to me.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Yeah.
I just open-ended, unloaded a lot of at you, but I mean, I
No,
want to
that's
kind of
great.
hit those notes, and I don't know where to
Yeah.
go with it, and I don't want to lose track of it. But those are kind of like opening thoughts when we talk about the concepts of diversity, equity,
Yeah.
inclusion.
Yeah. Great question. And I think one of the things about diversity, equity, and inclusion and DEI initiatives, it makes people uncomfortable, not because they don't agree with it, but because they don't understand it. So I'm glad
Mm.
you asked that. And it really
You
is.
just said what I said, by the way, in like 10 words, and I did in like 85. So
No, no, no.
I should just let you go.
No, no, this is great. This is great. I think we need to, it gives us opportunity to drill down. But I think that what at the base of it, all it is creating space for people to be seen, and all people to be
Hmm.
seen. And so, and especially as we go back to the theme of this conversation, which has been, exploring, and
Yeah.
the college being the 4 years where you can figure out who you are. I think more in, DEI exists in a lot of different places and in the industry and in all these different, but in higher education, it is so important during those 4 years because this is the time where students are exploring who they are. They're connecting more with their identity during these 4 years than any other time in their life and creating space for all students to be able to do that is so important. And so, when we look at diversity, it really includes everything. And I think oftentimes people think it only includes ethnic diversity, and that's just one facet of DEI work. We also have gender diversity, and when we look at a lot of our metrics, that's something that we at Viterbi put a lot of effort into to make sure that we're focused on. But there's gender, there's neurodiversity, there
Mm-hmm.
is, just it encompasses everything that we are as human beings. And this is kind of the sociologist in me that is coming out. And it really is about making sure that people are seen. And so when you have, different ethnicities, making sure that they're seen and that they're acknowledged and that, that they hold space and value and that we pour into them and that there's capacity put into them being here and being successful for all students,
Yeah.
and all genders. And even, and pronouns and making sure that we hold space for that. And so that people are able to to explore who they are
Right.
in a safe way and be seen and honored, and encouraged to do so. And that's really what we do, on the diversity side within higher education, specifically within Viterbi. It's creating those spaces and places for students to be seen, acknowledged, valued, and then encouraged to persist and to excel in engineering, because ultimately that's what we want to do. We want them to continue to graduate and to go off and to be, awesome engineers.
How do you, without going through a laundry list of all the work that you do, because you do a
Yeah,
lot, but how do you do that?
yeah,
I mean, I think that's a great strategic definition,
yeah,
uh, not theoretical definition because it's real, but this idea of like, okay, yes, that's the goal. That's what we want to do. This is what we're working
yeah,
to accomplish. And in a way, there's a way in which you never really hit that goal because
yeah,
this is a lot of this is tied up into an individual's identity,
yeah,
and oftentimes people making space for someone else that doesn't share that identity. So we're never going to have that feeling unless we're constantly working toward it. And I think that's an
yeah,
important element of this work. But what are the things
yeah,
that you do in your role,
mhm,
um, that help students be seen and recognize
yeah,
that they are a part of this and that they have their place and that they can be successful, and we're going
yeah.
to do whatever we can to help.
Yeah. So in the role that I'm in now, it really is about building bridges.
Mm,
Within Viterbi, we have a ton of resources that are geared towards, all of our students, but have a DEI focused. And so we have, the Center for Engineering Diversity, which is a great place that houses, several of our student organization, which I'll talk a little bit about in a second, but is a place that puts on, programs and is accessible for students 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's full-time staff that work in the center, to provide resources to the students and are usually kind of the front line when there's problems, when there's issues, when there's things that students want to talk through and need guidance on. They may go to the Center for Engineering Diversity, because they've studied in there on the weekends. They've had student group meetings in there in the evenings. And so it's a home base for them in a lot of ways. And then the professional staff that work there are able to really kind of help them. But in my role, it's really about taking a larger bird's eye view of where all of these diversity, support systems exist throughout the School of Engineering and kind of consolidating them and making sure that students know where they are, know how to access them, but also seeing where the gaps are,
right.
and seeing where we can be advocates for students on different fronts, whether it's through advisement or in the classroom with our faculty, or through our support services, through engagement, or through our Career Connections office. And so, in the Center for Engineering Diversity, there's 4 student organizations that are housed there: the National Society of Black Engineers, or NSBE, the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, or SHIP as it's called. We have our Quest group, which is Queers in Engineers, Science, and Technology, that is housed there, as well as SWE, which is the Society of Women Engineers. So those are the four organizations that are kind of housed within the Center for Engineering Diversity that work really closely with the staff there, do different programs, and really build community there. All students are welcome to the center, to these organizations. They all do membership drives to encourage student memberships. And it's one of the things that I really kind of like about that is it gives a space for students to be seen, valued, encouraged, and poured into. But it also encourages all students to come in and connect with student organizations that they may not know exist.
Right.
And so it's really kind of awesome to see how diverse the student populations within these student organizations actually is, and how students find community in different pockets. And that, once again, goes back to the exploration. Because all of this is open to everyone, students explore these organizations. They go to conferences where they're able to see it on a larger scale, and they're able to find wherever their community is, and really connect with students that are either in the same major, have gone and got an internship at the same company. There's all these connections, and CED, or the center, actually is kind of that focal point that helps build those bridges and connections to the students that are having these different diverse experiences.
I want to point out for people listening, and just to give credit where credit's due, a lot of students talk about they found success in their life or whatever. They did this, they did that because of the student organizations that exist. And that's definitely true. There's nothing wrong with that. But I want to highlight how much people like Kevin are not necessarily behind the scenes, but literally right there holding up the student organization to get those things done. Oftentimes I'm listening to some of our students and recent alumni talk about how, oh, they would not be anywhere without NSBE and all the work that NSBE did. I wouldn't be anywhere. I wouldn't have gotten that internship unless I was part of SWE. And while there's nothing wrong with any of those statements, it often overlooks how much work goes in from our professional staff, who are not only supporting, sometimes fixing, sometimes rebuilding, sometimes making sure the continuity of these student organizations exist as they move forward. And these four student organizations have such a history of fantastic leadership, such a history of huge involvement at the school. A lot of students talk about, like, oh yeah, no, that org's there, that org's there, that org's there. These orgs, in addition to a number of others, are a big part of this campus and the community that gets built there. And the work that Kevin and Tracy and Christina and others, not to mention numerous grad students, numerous people on the student engagement side, are working to not only support them and do all this stuff. This is a huge difference at USC. And you and I can talk about this, but no one else really knows this. Like the amount of stuff that happens as part of this collective stew of staff supporting student leadership carrying through staff ideas. It's a really fascinating mix at the school here.
Yeah. Yeah, you bring up a great point. And then the intersections that happen as well, because you have SWE members that are also a part of NSBE and also a part of SHIP, and SHIP members that are a part of NSBE and part of Quest and part of SWE. And so those organizations, while they are their own entity, they all intersect, and some members are a part of all four. And others as well. You have the design teams that they're a part of, and you have other organizations that exist within school. And so it really does create a really cool, diverse landscape and tapestry where students are able to find connections outside of the physical. So it's not just about seeing someone that looks like you, as sometimes it is. That is one point of it, but also we're in the same major, and then this student over here, we're in the same design team. And so it's really creating a platform for them to find those intersections and those connections, and really build out their community and their social capital. Ultimately, that's what it's about, and teaching them how to build social capital, and leveraging that throughout their time in Viterbi, and then once they're alums and they move on as well.
Exactly. I mean, you brought up this idea of representation. I've seen somebody that looks like me, and that's a commonly referred to anecdotal metric that prospective students are using when they're looking at colleges and universities. Like, do I have people like me that are there? However they want to identify that. And you brought up multiple ways in which diversity can be defined. And critics, skeptical people will often
Yeah.
say like, well, representation is not that just is like some sort of showmanship related to or a
Yeah.
performative element of
Yeah.
diversity, equity, inclusion offices. But what was really fascinating is people need to rewind and hear what you just said, is that it starts with seeing someone who looks like you, because then the connections that happen, then the opportunity for reinforcement, then the opportunities for peer relationships and peer growth. And going back to where we started this conversation on growth and growing pains, it's it sucks for everybody. Everybody has a hard
Yeah.
time. It's when you got a village, when you
Yep.
got the people with you, and oftentimes there are specific communities, sometimes specific unique identities
Yeah.
that never really feel like they have that village because of
Yeah.
some sort of definition of their identity before they come onto
Hmm.
campus, which is why roles and initiatives and offices and things related to diversity, equity, and inclusion are incredibly important. This is
Yeah.
not performative politics. This is
Yeah.
about helping students succeed, because
Yeah.
so many students come to college, so many students come to our campus from
Mhm.
so many different backgrounds. You can never assume a common playing field. You can never assume a common, like anything at this point.
Right. Yeah. That's spot on. You can't. And I think that's what that is so unique about and really awesome about the work that we do is really providing that landscape for them to kind of figure that out, but also providing support and programs that allow and facilitate
Yeah.
that exploration through offices like the Center for Engineering Diversity, which
Everybody
are
has a diversity brochure.
yeah,
I don't think anybody has what we do.
I agree.
I think a lot of people, I think there's a lot of great, I don't want to get it wrong. There's a lot of people that do a lot of great things. And you all,
Yeah.
like you said, we're having other discussions, which we may want to touch on,
Hmm.
related to you go to conferences, you're meeting with other professionals in the
Yeah.
space across other
Yeah.
universities, everybody's sharing ideas for best practices and learning how to
Hmm.
do this. But we have a really unique culture at the
Hmm.
school. I mean,
Yeah.
not to talk about exactly what we were talking about that other meeting, but there's no other school I would have known
Yeah.
I can think of off the top of my head that
Yeah.
has admission guy meeting with DEI guy, meeting with
Yeah.
head of student affairs person, meeting with academic advisors and student engagement and grad admission. Like that meeting doesn't exist anywhere
Yeah. Yeah. You're
that
right.
I know of.
And same. I don't see what we do in Viterbi many places with the attention that we give it and the intent,
Yeah.
like that you made a good point that, we're there kind of right at the front line. So, oftentimes in my role, students will just want to come and meet with me and
Yeah.
let's set it up. So we have meetings where we talk about their process and through all levels of their experience. So freshmen, sophomore, juniors, masters, PhD students, we meet with them all just to one check in. How's things going? What's happening?
Right.
And where can we be of assistance? And sometimes those conversations don't have a purpose, where it's just really I'm just here to, to be seen and to, I want to talk about my experience and what
Yeah.
I'm going through. And it's not really trying to connect them anywhere as it is just allowing and holding space for students, which is so important as they're exploring who they are and what matters to them and where they want to go. And of course, in the work that we do, we like to drill down and get in there. And so,
Hmm.
and that's where I have the opportunity to say, okay, well, what's next? Let's start thinking about when you're done in Viterbi, where do you want to go?
Right.
What type of company do you want to work for? What type of engineer do you want to be? What matters to you? Why engineering? So let's explore that and let's connect that here. Oh, let me connect you with Career Connections because they have some events coming up with
Right.
the companies that you're interested in working in. And
Hmm.
so now I'm sending an email in that moment to Career Connections, and now they're setting up a meeting with this one student. And that's like you said, those connections and those intersections and just the ability to expand who you are. And it may have started with, I'm looking for people that look like me, and it grows into so much more after that.
Depending on how you want to answer this question,
Mhm.
relative to the profession or the important elements of DEI in general, or your job specifically,
Yeah,
you've been in it now for a little over a year now, right?
yeah, yeah.
What has been or what is the biggest challenge? What's the hardest thing right now that you're grappling with, and
Yeah.
or what has been incredibly hard? Where you're like, oh God, this one thing. And again, conceptually, or micro to you?
Yeah. I think my biggest challenge, well, one of my biggest challenges, there's tons of challenges. I'll highlight two. One is really pulling together all of the DEI efforts that happen within the School of Engineering.
Mm.
As most know, we're a large school and we're made up of, 8 different academic units and different majors that students
We have a big
can
footprint.
we have a huge footprint. And so students find identity there too. So, if you have a mechanical engineering student, they may find their identity, they're connecting in the mechanical engineering department, and with their advisor and with the student groups there. And that's great. And that's what we want. And there may be DEI efforts that are happening there. So they're all kind of happening within the school. And so it's really pulling one of the challenges is pulling all that together. And the reason to pull it all together is so that students know what all of their resources are. So, and that they know them early. So it's not, oh, I've spent a year here and I'm finding out about this and this and this. That is pulling it all together. So once they start as freshmen, they know what all their resources are. They know how to connect. They know where to connect.
Yeah.
And they know where to go. So that's been one of my challenges, and one of the things that we've done a really good job in over this past year is pulling it all together, making it make sense, seeing where there's overlap and alignment, and instead of reinventing the wheel, connecting those dots and making it one big DEI, effort. I think the other thing that is a little bit challenging is, some of the things that are happening nationally with the Supreme Court ruling.
Hmm.
That's something that we're taking a look at and seeing at how we're going to navigate it and how we're still going to support students. I've had conversations with students that are concerned about it, not for
Really?
themselves, but for students coming behind them.
Oh, I was gonna
Um,
say, I was gonna say, are they concerned about their current life in college?
No, not.
They're just,
It's about those coming behind them and
oh, wow.
and how that's going to affect students in the college admission process and how we'll look at that. And so, it's a lot about reassuring students that, we know how to do this work and that and I think especially USC and being in California, California went through Prop 209, back in 96, which is very similar to the Supreme Court ruling, but for the UC system and public institutions. And
Right.
so there's a lot of ways that, though we're still able to support students and still able to connect students to the opportunities within Viterbi, in spite of some of the legal things that are happening nationally.
Yeah, I mean, we've had multiple conversations about it, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's going to be an ongoing challenge for quite some time. And I think the
Hmm.
only thing I want people to know is diversity, similar to the whole point of this conversation, but diversity in general,
Yeah,
and the ideas of creating a diverse student body are one of our largest priorities in the Viterbi School. And we're following suit with the university's importance and priority related to
yeah.
diversity, but want to make sure that everybody understands that we will never break the law, and our
Right,
systems are built into place where that we will never be doing that in the admission standpoint. And I also want to be clear that no one has ever been admitted to USC based on
right.
any type of race or ethnic background. But it's important to understand everybody's back. Just this whole conversation, you can understand everybody comes from
Yeah,
different backgrounds, and that's important. But I always want to tell people that may
yeah,
be skeptical of this type of messaging, that diversity is not important for the sake of diversity, but from an engineering perspective, it's that the
yeah,
problems that we face as a society are for the entire world. They're for humanity, and humanity is diverse, and the problems facing humanity are complex and multifaceted. And the worst thing that we
yeah,
can do as administrators is to create a student body that has some sort of homogeneous background or homogeneous set of thoughts, because those
yeah,
teams are not going to create the best possible solutions. It's by bringing these types of people together, different types of people, and all the different versions of who they are and where they come from, to create
yeah,
really interesting, unique solutions. That's going
yeah,
to be the teams that are greater than the sum of their parts,
yeah,
is what's most important. And we're trying to reflect, humanity.
yeah,
If we don't, we're not be creating a good engineering program. So I think
yeah.
that's what's important that everybody should understand if they get this far into the episode.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true, and I totally agree with you. And that's why I said I think we've at USC we've definitely been ahead of this for a long time, and and really committed to this work. And I think one quote that I kind of keep at the forefront of my mind at all times was spoken by the late Dr. John Brooks Slaughter, who the
Hmm.
Center for Engineering and Diversity was recently named after. And John, for anybody listening, if you ever got, if you have some free time, definitely do a quick search for John Brooks Slaughter.
Yes.
He was living history, and we were honored to have him as dual appointed faculty within the School of Engineering, as well as the USC School of Education, Rossier School of Education. And so he was instrumental in really helping push forward a lot of our diversity initiatives and our strategies as well. But he was literally living history, and we just
Hmm.
lost him last week. And
Yeah.
so a great loss to that. But he had a quote that he said that I'll never forget as long as I live. And it's something that I approach this work by, and it's diversity occurs at the intersection of excellence and equity. And so, and that's something that just rings true to the work that we do. It's really about, providing equity for the students that are already showing up in excellence. And they're qualified, and our students are doing amazing things. And so it's really about providing opportunities for the students that are here within Viterbi, and connecting them, not just providing the opportunity, but connecting them to the opportunities that already exist. And educating them on what is out there. And so just case in point, one of the things I brought up was about research.
Hmm.
Oftentimes when I'm talking to a student, especially a younger student, a freshman, sometimes they've heard research, but they don't really know what that entails or what's going to be asked of them. And so it's really about educating them. Okay, well, these are the labs that we have within Viterbi, and this is what students are doing in those labs at the undergraduate level. This is how they're applying that to the work that they're learning in their classroom. This is how they're going to apply that to a possible graduate degree. This is where they're adding it to their resume, and really creating and educating our student populations about the opportunities that exist here. They already are bringing the excellence. They were admitted on their merit, and so it's really showing and building those pipelines to the opportunities that exist, and that's where diversity occurs.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing up John Slaughter.
Yeah,
It's really fun. I had nowhere near the amount of opportunities to engage with him as you did, but I
yeah,
still knew him, and we
yeah,
engaged on a number, maybe once or twice a year on something.
yeah,
My favorite basic like anecdote about John Slaughter is he never says no.
yeah,
And without getting too much into it,
yeah,
that's a rarity with faculty.
yeah,
And
yeah,
he's always down.
yep,
Hey, can we get your help? I'm curious if you might want to look over something. I'm curious if you might want to do something. I'm curious if you might want to show up to something and have you do this,
yeah,
this, this. It was like, absolutely,
yeah,
wherever you need me. And it was
yeah,
his life of service
yeah,
was something, in addition to, as you said, living history. I'm minimizing by just saying his life of service, because the amount of, if when someone Googles him and looks at his accomplishments and what he's
yeah,
done and where he's been, an amazing person to not only have
yeah,
affiliated with the university, but it's such an amazing experience to just known him.
yeah,
Really, really sad that he passed.
yeah, yeah. You hit it right on the nail. He used to often he's just student centered. He
Yeah.
was a student centered,
And he didn't have to
person,
be at
and he
where
didn't
he
have to
was at
be.
any point in his
Yeah,
career. He was always
yeah,
an elevated person, incredibly
yes,
executive, if that makes any sense, but
yeah,
never had that. Sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah.
he didn't need to be.
No, yeah, he didn't. And I think that's why people didn't often know how accomplished he actually was, because he was
That's a
so
good point.
down to earth. And like he would often come into the center just to eat his lunch. And we would see him and we're like, oh, you want to come and talk? He's like, no, I'm not here to see you guys. I'm just hanging out with the students. I
That's
just want to eat
awesome.
my lunch and watch them study. And if they have questions about anything, and he had questions for them, like, about how their
Right.
classes were going. And he was genuinely interested and how
Right.
their classes were going, and if there was anything that they needed, and where, like you said, where he could be of service to them.
Hmm.
And I would often sit and I would watch, and I'm like, wow, these students don't even know who they have in front of him, because this man
No.
is phenomenal and so accomplished and is truly living history. And he's just, salt of the earth. He's just there, in the grass with them, and really cared about their success and the experience they were having while they were achieving that success. So yeah, I mean, he's really why I do the work that I do. I want to continue his legacy, on and making sure that we're still, upholding the things that he fought so hard for. And he really does have a way of putting, making sense of what diversity and what this landscape actually is and what it looks like.
The perfect segue to my next
Yeah.
question. I asked you about challenges. What's hard?
Mhm.
What are you excited about? What's good right now?
Yeah.
Where are you optimistic about where we
Yeah.
are in this place?
Each year, and I know you can agree with this, because I've heard you say this every year, but each year, the students that we bring in to Viterbi are even better than the previous.
Mm,
Academically, just the stuff that's on their resume, and that for me is always mind blowing. When I
mhm,
sit down and talk to some of these freshman students, usually within the first couple of weeks of them being in Viterbi, I'm mind blown by who these students are,
mhm,
what they've either accomplished prior to getting here or what they plan to accomplish.
mhm.
Their sense of self, mind blowing. Like they know who they are, they know what they want, but and that's where we kind of come in and allow them grace to pivot if things change. And that's usually when I say, okay, we got it. I know that's
Yeah.
what you want to do, and we're going to help you get there. But if it changes, we're here to help you make that change. But that's one area that I'm so optimistic in. I'm always humbled by the amount of excellence that our students bring to the table, and it makes us show up even more because these students they're on fire. They get in the class and they're doing amazing things in the classroom. They're doing amazing things outside of the classroom. And it's, a lot of them hit the ground running. Which is it just, it motivates me to want to do the work that I do even more because I see the work that they're putting in and I see how you know how they're just ready. They're ready to go. And so many of them will join, different student organizations. I'm always shocked at how many freshman students come into my office and say, I want to get connected with research, or I want to do an internship. And I'm like, wow, you haven't even had a midterm yet. And I'm like, well,
Hmm.
that's
One foot
great
in front of
then.
the other. Let's not put the cart in front of the
Right,
horse.
exactly that, but they're ready, and they don't have to be convinced about it. They know that they wanted to have these experiences. And so sometimes it's about sitting down and looking at, okay, this is where we are, in your college career.
Yeah.
Let's figure out where we're going to add that research experience. Let's figure out where we're going to add that internship, and plotting those courses with those students is just it's phenomenal. And then I think seeing the amount of work that on the administrative side that we put into the student experience is is a point that I think is worth celebrating. We never press repeat. I will
Yeah.
say every year
Yeah.
it's about sitting down as a school, as a division, and figuring out, okay, who are the students coming in now? Not what we did last year, because
Right.
last year worked for last year, but
Right. Right.
who's
Right.
going to be coming in now?
Everything's
And what
different.
do they need? And how can we adjust for that? And so that level of evolution and adjustment and pivoting and really kind of catering to who we're servicing, it keeps
Here,
it new. It keeps it
so
new.
so you're triggering something that I might just maybe we'll have a longer conversation at some point, but now I'm
Yeah.
curious, and who knows if everybody wants to listen to it.
Okay.
Um, how with this generation,
Yeah.
and I say this generation, knowing full well I sound like an old man saying "get off my lawn." But with our current, incoming class of recent years and in the next couple years,
Yeah.
there is it resonates so much what you said about like their sense of agency
Mhm.
and their I'm going to do everything, mentality when they get here. We
Yeah.
know they won't. We
Right.
can't tell them that.
Yeah.
Where do we, I mean, maybe this is just the hard part of the job that you and others do. How do we figure out how to encourage without continuing to say, yes, nothing's wrong with you, right? Like,
Right.
you know, you can do whatever you want. When, we need to talk about like brass tacks. We need to talk about
Yeah.
doing well in calculus before we're doing
Yes.
all this other stuff.
Yeah.
How do we dance that dance?
Yeah.
And I know there's not a right answer for this. I don't, but it's
Yeah.
funny because I see it from a recruitment standpoint of
Yeah.
like, it's why I give such long answers. I'm
Yeah.
like, can I do X? All right,
Yeah.
son, sit down. Let me tell you why can and should and
Yeah.
will you are kind of completely different answers. And I don't know
Yeah.
about you.
Yeah, that's a conversation that I personally have a lot with students that come in and they want to do it all. It's a everything bagel.
Mm,
And I usually will tell them, yes, we can do it all. Let's figure out how to do it all. But the reason, the only reason that you're here is to be a successful student and to get your engineering degree. And we don't ever want to compromise that
right.
because of all the things that you want to do. So let's start there. And it depends on when who I'm having this conversation with, if it's a
True.
junior or a sophomore or a senior or a freshman. But it's really about, I often will bring it back to the academics because one of the things that I love about USC and Viterbi specifically is the many offerings that we give our students. Like, there's so much. There's more than what a student can actually do. They can't do it all in the 4 years that they're going to be here. And that's intentional. That's by design. There's just because our students are diverse and their interests are diverse. So we have to meet that need. But the reason you're here is to be a successful student and to graduate. And so that is always going to be the priority. And so when students are like, yeah, I want to be an ambassador and I want to sit on panels and I want to do this and I want to do that. I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about how are your classes going so far? Let's bring it back to an academic standpoint. Okay, what classes are you currently in? How
Mm,
many units are you taking? Okay, what classes are you feeling really strong in? Which ones are a little bit more of a concern? Okay, well, let's explore that. Why is this one a concern? Okay, well, these are the
right.
resources that are available to you within Viterbi. Let's make sure that we're covering that base so that your classes are covered, your concerns are covered. And if there is a problem, that we're able to connect with that as well. If there's tutoring that you may need, or if there's peer tutoring or mentoring, whatever it may be, let's get you connected there academically first before we do everything. And one of the you've seen this as well, I'm sure, is that balance always tends to occur when students are once classes start to pick up and they realize, okay, I have to pull back a little bit,
Mm,
and I have to really focus on class. And in our roles we have to constantly remind them that's why you're here. So
yeah.
yeah, you may want to do all those things and we can get to them, but let's make sure we're solid here first before we start to engage everywhere. And so it takes a little time, but I think students start to balance it out within that first year and a half, where they see, okay, classes are demanding,
Yeah.
which is why I think the space of the Center for Engineering Diversity is so important, because you mentioned earlier, you got to find your tribe, because
Yeah.
engineering is one of those things where you cannot do it alone.
Right.
And you're going to need the support of your peers. You're going to need the support of us as administrators. You're going to need the support of your faculty. We're all in this together for your success as a student. And so it really is about, having that place where you can find your tribe, and then also having people that pour into you about why you're here, remind you when we see that you're veering off a little bit and you got too much on your plate, like, you might want to pull back and refocus.
How
Ongoing
do
conversations.
how do we it's often that the ones that are in constant communication and asking for help are the ones that rarely need it. And the ones that don't think they need help are the ones that really need a lot of help.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the A students are like, oh my God, I need to slow down.
Yeah.
I might not get an A plus in this class. We're like,
Yeah.
yeah, oh my God, get over it. And then the other
Right.
ones were like, I'm cool. I'm like, are you? Because I saw your
Yeah.
grades.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely see that quite often. And I think that's some of the anxiety that different students bring in, like where some of the ones that are doing really well they put that anxiety in themselves to continue to do really well. So they're always afraid that their grades are going to
And
slip.
then
And so,
imposter syndrome hits
and
them super
imposter some,
hard.
yep.
But
And
it
so
doesn't hit
those
the
are the
other ones.
ones,
The confident
yeah.
ones are like, well, we really need to have a talk about your confidence.
Like, let's pull back. And yeah, so those are conversations that, we have on both ends, where we have the student that is doing well and there's no reason for them to be stressed out, but they are. And then the
Yeah.
students that maybe should be a little stressed out and pull back aren't. But I think that's one of the beauties of places like the center, because it's so informal.
So
Yes,
creating that like that tribal cohort, like these conversations
exactly.
are happening around you and you're
Yep.
involved, but I'm not telling you. So
Yeah,
maybe you go home and meditate on that in your own private
exactly.
time and you're like, oh, I heard them say this. I probably should be
I
doing
probably should
that.
do it. Yeah. And a lot of it
That's a
too,
good point.
strangely enough, through, and maybe not strangely enough, a lot of it is peer. So, they have
Hmm.
a peer mentoring program in the center because, we feel like we're hip, but at the same time, to them, we are the old guys.
Yeah.
And there may be
We
some
we got our
intimidation there.
Riz, right? We're
Right,
good to go.
right. Yeah. So,
I'm
I
sure
think there
I
may be
used that
some.
correctly.
Yeah, no, totally. And there's some intimidation there. And so, the first kind of I guess the first line will be our peer mentors, and they're the
Mhm.
ones they're still students. And so they're living the experience of our younger students. And so they're all in it together. And so a lot of it is training those peer mentors to be able to recognize that.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the first place we'll hear about it, where a student, they may not tell us that things aren't going well, but they will tell their peer mentor because it feels safer to talk to another student about, some challenges they may be having. And then we can kind of help facilitate some avenues of success through the mentors and then bringing them into conversations with us. um and it only takes one time to get them in the office and see that we're still co-creators in this. So this isn't the type of environment where we're telling you you have to do this and this is what you're going to do. This is what you should do. This is how we should navigate this, but we are co-creators. Like, you have a part, I have a part, we're going to put this together and we're going to get to the end, but this is an experience that we're co-creating together.
I don't know if you realize it, but what seemed probably at the beginning of this conversation to our listeners is a completely pointless conversation about where you went to college and how you got to where you are. I don't know if you remember, we talked about tripping, falling, wrong mistakes, peer influence, finding part of the whole, like basically, we've now gone completely full circle to the point of recognizing that it's not so much luck, it's that there are some really interesting and focus driven people creating systems by which accountability and support networks are part of the student community here. And it's we talk about things that happened to us, we thought just happened to us. Turns out no, we were just supported in the right place at the right time.
There it is.
So we
There
went
it
full
is.
circle.
Full circle moment.
Okay. I've got a final thing I want to
Yeah.
do with you.
Yeah.
I've been doing this with a few of the people that come on. It's our lightning round set of questions. Are you
Okay.
ready for the lightning round?
I'm ready. Let's
Okay,
go.
here we go. Ding ding. Texting or talking?
Texting.
Favorite day of the week?
Friday.
Favorite city in the US besides the one you live in?
Atlanta.
Nickname your parents used to call you?
KK.
Hey, now on, man. Last song you downloaded?
Oh,
Or not download, but
um,
like it would like maybe you went to your phone and said, I gotta listen to this.
oh my goodness. What did I just listen to? It's a Christmas song. I mean, it is
Yeah, we're in the holiday
because
season. It's
I
a little
know.
light.
It
Okay.
might have been, and this is gonna really date me. It might have been. I think it was one of the Temptation Christmas songs I was playing while I was doing some work earlier. So it was a Temptation song from the
Okay.
Christmas album.
Was it never mind. We'll talk about it later. Would you rather be able to speak every language in the world or be able to talk to animals? Lightning round.
Oh, animals.
Okay. Favorite holiday?
Uh, Christmas.
How long does it take for you to get ready?
45 minutes.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I
Sorry,
know.
I was not trying to be so exaggerative. Scale of 1 to 10. How good of a driver are you?
9.
Fill in the blank. Taylor Swift is
Genius.
at
Talented.
what
Yeah.
at agreed. At what age do you want to retire?
Ooh. Um, huh. 60.
Okay. Invisibility or super strength?
Invisibility.
Is it wrong for a vegetarian to eat animal crackers?
No, not at all.
I will give you one last thing in case you're interested in doing this because I've been hitting you hard with so many questions. But oftentimes it's rare that someone can come on here and actually embarrass me with things. Is there any, because we've had many experiences, is there anything you would like to share with the listeners that I would probably not want them to know?
You know, what's funny? Yes, actually.
Oh no, you got super excited. Your face.
And I was like, wait a minute, there was a time. There was one time, and I'm sure you remember this. When I worked in Central Admission, we do a lot of traveling and we do a
Yeah.
lot of recruitment all over the country. And Paul and I were in Miami for
Hmm.
some recruitment
By the
events.
way, the opening of the story can go in multiple directions, and I'm fascinated of which one you're going in because we were in Miami a few times.
We were in Miami a few times. And so we had finished work for the day and we went to grab some food. And, this was, gosh, nearly 20 years ago. So, we were
Yeah,
even younger than we are now. But,
yeah.
and it just kind of goes to show how hard we work, I guess, because, we're in Miami of all cities, it has an amazing nightlife. And what do we choose to do? We went to go see Brother Bear at the movies.
The Disney animated film Brother Bear. It came out
Yes.
in November of 2003. It was exactly 20 years ago, by the way.
And there was a moment where I was in there, and I think you know what? Actually, I think I fell asleep in the
You did.
movie
You did.
because you laughed at me because I snored in the
You
movie
did.
theater.
You did.
But I'm like, man, we're some young guys in Miami watching a Disney movie on a Friday night. We could be out.
Because I feel bad about this
Yeah,
because I'm pretty sure it was my idea. And it was at this
yeah,
moment of like, if I remember correctly, this was, I think, our second trip to Miami that year. And the first trip was lots of fun, which we
yeah.
won't talk about.
Right.
But it was like, what are we going to do? We have to do something because we were
Yeah,
just like, whatever. But I think we were both just also really tired.
yeah, yeah,
Because that was an interview weekend and we were just like, it was thank God we don't do this anymore.
yeah,
And it was like, I don't know. We're just like, I think we spent like hours because it was just the two of us. Like, what are we going to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know what you want to do. I'm like, well, maybe let's see a movie. Well, what's playing? I don't know. Well, like, this one kind of looks like it might be fun. And I'm a fan of animated movies and I get made fun of a lot. And I was thinking about this conversation the other day, Leedy. I know we're going to talk about this. I had a feeling that that's what you would say. And so I started like trying to relive, like, where were we in that process? And I
yeah.
just remember thinking, like, I was excited about this movie because it looked super funny and it wasn't as good as I thought it might have
Right.
been.
Yeah.
And you had every right to fall asleep. And I did not. This was also the time, and I'll out myself.
Yeah.
This is also a time that I think around this time, if not the year prior,
Yeah.
I remember taking a date out to see like like a Sesame Street movie because I thought it was going to be funny. I thought it was going to be, and I realized like I just embarrassed myself, and I never talked to that girl again. It was a bad moment. So this is in line with me being an idiot and just like doing stupid things. But yeah, no, we went to go see Brother
So fun.
Bear
In the middle of Miami on a
in the
Friday
middle
night.
of Miami.
Yeah.
Yeah. Coconut
Yeah.
Grove, if I remember correctly. It
Yep. We
was,
were at
and I think
Coconut
we had,
Grove.
yeah, we had a little man date. We had a little man
Yeah,
date.
we
We went to
did. We did.
Cheesecake Factory.
Yeah.
Kevin got dessert for me. I thought it
Yeah.
was nice. And
Yeah.
we went to the movies.
It was a brother bear date. Oh, yeah.
All right.
Good times.
Well,
Good
with that,
times.
Brother Bear, I appreciate you being on the podcast. And thanks so much for
Yeah.
joining us and doing all the
Uh,
work that you do.
it's been great. Thanks for having me. It's been good to talk about this. And I hope all our listeners were able to pull some tidbits and some morsels that they can take with them. And, it's exciting stuff that we
Good
got going
stuff.
on here.
All
Yeah.
right, man.
All
Thank you
right.
very much.
All right. Take care, everybody.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Paul, thank you for bringing him on. Also for letting him share the story of your funny story. I'm personally very
It's not
entertained
that
by
bad,
it.
right?
Yeah, no, not that bad, not that bad.
Good.
I'm trying to think if I remember any worse ones though. I don't, but I'll seek them out. I'll go hunt them down on campus
There,
and try and hear the
There are
bad.
plenty in which people are sworn to secrecy. There are plenty in which people are sworn to secrecy. And I think people worry because if they tell any stories about me, they know I have worse stories about them. That's
Mhm.
always the threat. So there we go. It is the last opportunity before students have the opportunity to apply for January 15th. And if you're applying, hit submit. If you're not, don't worry about it, and have a great life wherever you end up going, and all the other schools you're applying to. And I wish you the best of luck if you've ever considered or engaged with us as part of the university and the engineering school. I know it's a stressful process, but I wish you all the best of luck if you're still happen to be listening to this podcast. Now, this is a time that's kind of interesting because we're working with seniors who are wrapping up their application, but this is also the time where juniors are heavily engaged in the process. So students that are graduating in 2025 are visiting right now. There's lots of opportunities for visiting, lots of opportunities to get to know the university as they start their college search. And there's lots of weeks and days off in the near future, in January and February, and obviously spring break coming up. And so if you are a younger student, junior or younger, that's looking to learn a little bit more about USC and the Viterbi School of Engineering, I encourage you to go to excuse me. Whoa, geez, gosh, I don't know what's going on with my voice. I encourage you to go to viterbiadmission.usc.edu/events. viterbiadmission.usc.edu/events. We have programs like our Visit Viterbi experience, which goes on most Mondays and Fridays, and every once in a while, a Wednesday or some other days get sprinkled in as available. We have some virtual information sessions that happen on afternoons of Tuesdays and Thursdays and sometimes Saturdays. And we've got them sprinkled out on our website. So go straight to the website, register to come visit campus, or register for one of our virtual sessions to learn a lot more about the school. And when you do that, we'll also be in contact with you via email and send you even more information about the school so you can learn as much as you can as you're considering lots of different colleges and universities that are out there. There's nothing else you need to do. Trust me, all those different events encapsulate everything you're going to need to know. We hope that you're going to see you soon. Do you remember, Maya, when you started looking at colleges?
I do. I was just thinking about it as you were talking. I think it was my junior year. I came to California for spring break, so I was with my family and we enjoyed the nice weather, but we also did some college tours. So I just remember being amazed. USC was beautiful. Actually, my dad remembers you giving the presentation that we went
Oh,
to.
really?
Yeah, like very specifically. So yeah, I would totally recommend
In your junior year?
in my junior year. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's a
which
lot.
makes
It's a long memory.
it honestly it makes me feel old. Like I'm like, oh, that was like a couple years ago. Like, no, that was a while ago. I'm a senior in college
Do you
now.
ever think about it like when you're in it now? Because like a couple weeks ago, like December, we were doing that session together. Do you ever think about it when you're on the other end of it? Because now you're the
Sometimes I
current student
do.
talking to the prospective students.
Yeah, and especially on this podcast as well. Like if myself, my junior year of high school could see me now and what I'm doing, like it would be insane. I would just be blown away. Yeah, I never even considered that I would like get into USC and come here. I know like as a high school student, it's hard to picture yourself, but like being here now, yeah, that's a big gratitude moment.
That's great. Well, for all of you out there that are listening, thank you for listening. If you ever need anything else, you know how to get in touch with us on our website, and we will see you again next week with another episode of the Viterbi Voices. Bye, everybody.